What's up, guys? Chris with the Simple Man Project, simplemanproject.com, where we're building a community of guys that believe it's a good thing to be a guy. Hey, I have with me in this episode and for the next 3 episodes a pretty special guy. This is my oldest son, Eli. What's up, Eli?
Hey everybody, good to be here.
You are the very first guest on the Simple Man Project.
I'm honored.
You should be honored. That's a pretty cool thing. So recently, this guy came back from an overseas mission. So we're going to take the next 3 episodes and we're going to talk through his experience. And I'm really excited to share the stories that he has with you guys. This is going to be awesome. So Eli, tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up as a teenager and going through that phase of life where your parents' faith has to become your faith. And describe that transition for us, going from 16, 17 years old, figuring things out. How did you land at YWAM in Orlando?
Yeah, it's a pretty, it's a lot of hills and valleys, a lot of variation. But I started in high school to kind of realize that I needed to take my own initiative with my faith. The thing about faith is the only one that can really hold you accountable is yourself and God. But if you choose, you can shut God out. God's a gentleman. He's not going to bust down the door. He just knocks and waits for us to answer. And so going out through high school, I would go back and forth through phases of being really excited about my faith, and then I wouldn't find a way to sustain it. And so I continued going through high school. Eventually, my senior year, I led a Christian club at my school because I felt like that was a good thing to do. And it was very beneficial for me. It helped me get closer to God, but it wasn't the final staple that really sealed my faith. I thought that it was leading me in that direction, but it ended up not. So we had a concert in February of 2020, and I actually went to a meeting in preparation for it. And we had some people there who prophesied over me, and they told me specifically that for the rest of the year, after my concert happened, there was going to be a lot of things that were thrown at me. I need to be prepared to fight off the enemy. They couldn't have been more right because COVID happened and everything got canceled. And senior season of rugby went out the window. Prom and graduation went out the window. And I lost connection with a lot of people.
You did get to graduate, though.
Well, I mean, the drive-through graduation.
Drive-through graduation,
So,
and you
yeah.
got to pose with a cardboard cutout of the principal.
That's
right?
true.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
was...
I would have just rather gone to the In-N-Out drive-through, if I'm being honest. That was,
Yeah.
but it's okay. It's okay. I have my peace now. I'm good. I talked to God about it, and we're moving on. So, yeah. So COVID happened. I got really depressed. The most depressed I've ever been in my entire life. Had some issues with even considering why I was existing. The existential question. For a long time, I had nothing to do but sit at home with my thoughts. I was in unhealthy habits, and I wasn't in the Word. I hadn't been in for months. I felt like every time I prayed, I was hitting the ceiling. And in the midst of this, I had a friend who came back from a YWAM school called DTS, Discipleship Training School. And he came, he's like, hey, let's grab lunch. I just had this incredible experience for the last 5 months. I'd love to tell you about it. And so I said, okay, sure. And he took me out to lunch and was just so on fire. And I could tell, scripture talks about they will know us by the way that we look, that way we marked with something different. And he was like that in a way that I'd never seen before in someone my age. And so we talked, and he told me all these great things, and I got really excited. And then he told me the price tag, which was $10,000, and immediately just shut off, because when you're not in the Word and when you're not talking to God, there's zero faith.
So you didn't have $10,000 in your bank account?
No, I think I might have had $10, and
Little short.
a little bit. Well, hey, kind of like you, huh?
Yeah, kind of like me. Cut it.
So, yeah. So he told me it was $10,000. Immediately, I shut down, and he saw that, and he was like, look, if this is something that sounds interesting to you and you don't know what you want to do after high school, I highly recommend that you do this. If money's the only reason you're not doing it, do it anyway. And I said, okay. So I started on this journey of figuring out what YWAM even was, deciding what different schools looked like. I settled on YWAM Orlando, just like my friend Caleb, who brought it to me, did. They had a sports and fitness elective, which I'm very passionate about. And so that's what I decided to do. I applied, I got accepted. And from then on, I kind of just worked my way through it. I started slowly. I was nervous at the time, and again didn't have a lot of faith, and so I started kind of telling people I was doing it, uh, almost in faith, like in a step of faith. I was telling people in the fall I am going to Iron Orlando, even though I had zero money, and I just started fundraising and asking random people. I used Zoom a lot because it was COVID and people were scared, so I got on Zoom calls and talked with people, and eventually, through God's grace, I got the money to go there. The way that they divvy it up, I only had to raise about half the money to get there for the beginning, and so that's what I did. I raised half the money, and I shipped out to Florida, flew across the country from California, and it was really exciting, but also the night I was leaving, I was kind of terrified because it was real. And so I made that jump, and I went to Florida for 3 months, and I met God in an entirely new way, and really found that foundation that I was looking for. Whereas my faith was wavering, and I'd have seasons of going in and out through this 5-month process, I really found a way to connect with God intimately, and I really understood what everyone talked about when they said relationship with God.
So one of the things that we talk about on our channel is this idea of manhood being a good thing, right? And society really pushes back against, especially a biblical definition of manhood. And one of the things we see in the Bible is men routinely taking risks, right? Taking a giant leap of faith. What would be one piece of advice that you could give somebody your age, maybe even somebody older? Because the honest truth is, you have experiences that me as your dad, 24 years older than you are, I've never had. So you have a life experience that I can draw from, because you've done so much now that I've never experienced. So what is that? What is one thing, if you could boil all of that transformational experience from going from a high school student struggling in your faith and moving in faith, right? Taking a big chance.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you would say that you learned that you can share with everybody that might make a difference in their lives?
Yeah. A big thing that I learned is, if you don't have any fear in your life, there's no room for God to move. There's no room for him to work whatsoever. Should we surround ourselves with fear and temptation and those kind of things? Absolutely not. But if you feel God's calling you in a direction that maybe scares you, jump. Don't step in, don't go slowly, just jump. That's where God meets you, and that's where the exciting things happen. And I mean, we see time and time again in the Bible, like you said, men in the Bible, stepping out in faith and God meeting him in that place. And I think something that's so powerful as well in that is find separation, complete separation from other people, from your family, from your friends, and have moments where you're just with God. I mean, Jesus went into the wilderness and experienced the Father in an entirely new way in Scripture. And it's so important that we get away. Even for me, once I made the decision to step out in faith, going across the country to Florida, or even if it's just a couple hours away from your home, getting that space from what you're used to, because God in California is the same God in Orlando. And so he guided me through that as I created new relationships with people. And it really forced me to rely on him first and then move on with what other people were telling me to do. And it really helped me focus on what he had for me instead of what other people expected of me.
Nice. That's great. And I actually was talking with a mentor of mine yesterday, and he said something really interesting. If you're experiencing fear in your life, move against it. Make an intentional move toward that fear, and move against that fear in order to experience exactly what you're talking about, God moving in your life. Because a lot of times the things that we fear the most are the things that God is actually calling us to.
Yeah.
And so move against that faith directly. So if I'm afraid of spiders, it's a terrible example, but if I'm afraid of spiders, then I need to expose myself to spiders. It's actually a psychological technique called desensitization that's been in practice for a long time. Funny story, I ended up in an industry where I was surrounded by spiders all the time, and I'm not really afraid of spiders anymore. So it really works.
Yeah.
It really works.
It does.
And things that are scary that God calls you to, like starting a YouTube channel in your 40s.
Yeah.
That you really are intimidated by, do it.
Yeah.
Because that's what God's calling you to do.
Yeah.
Love that. Move against the fear.
I think an important underline there, something we talked about in my campus phase in the 3 months that I was in Orlando. We talked about being called first, right? The Bible tells us, they give us the Great Commission, the Bible tells us to go, and it's so important that we do. But moving out to the middle of nowhere in a mud hut to reach unreached people is useless if God didn't call you there, right? There's no point in stepping into fear and surrounding yourself with that if it's not where God is directing you, right? So if I jump into a pit of snakes because I hate snakes, it's okay. I'm desensitizing myself. I'm conquering that fear, but what really was gained, right? And so if God is calling you to start a local business, or if God is calling you to even just lead a small group at your church, jump into that. Jump into what God's calling you to do. And that's the kind of fear we're after. We're after complete fear of the Lord, which in biblical terms is just total reverence and respect for who God is and what he's calling us to. And so when we're stepping into fear, it's so important that the silver lining there is it's under God's direction, because our primary goal should be obedience before anything else. Because I believe it's in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, but Paul talks about, if I don't do it from love, if I don't do everything I'm doing from love, specifically from the Father, I'm just a clanging gong and a clashing cymbal. I could do all these things, have all these works, but it's useless if I don't have love from the Father. I'm not doing those things in love. And what is love but doing things that are asked of you from the people that you love, right? And so that's something I really learned that's so important, is just being obedient to God, and that's the fear we step into.
Yeah, that's a great pull from 1 Corinthians 13. Well done. I like it. Yeah, and living with courage in life can be one of the most difficult things for us, right? Especially nowadays during COVID, and even though we're starting to emerge from this cocoon we've put ourselves in, when we feel a call, a draw toward doing something that is a risk for us, we have now become so accustomed to sitting at home and watching YouTube channels, to sitting at home and watching Netflix, and ordering food on Uber Eats, and working remotely, and being really sheltered in our homes. None of those things are bad in and of themselves, right? But when we get into a life situation where we just live this sheltered life, we really limit what God's going to do through our lives.
Yeah.
And so we need to strike out in courage. We need to put ourselves out there and take a risk. Now, fun fact, Eli is just like his mom. You are 100% extrovert feeler, right? I am 100% introvert thinker. And so I'm super cool with being at home and watching YouTube videos for most of my life.
Yeah.
And for somebody like you, and I think that's why when you were talking about being on lockdown for COVID, it was so difficult for you, because God built you to need human interaction in a different way than me. And so for you introverts out there, don't let your introverted nature stand in your way. Have courage, strike out, do something, speak up, say something, and make a difference in people's lives. All right? Don't let that hold you back.
For you extroverts, since that is my boat, something I struggle with a lot was finding that time to be alone with God and have that quiet space. I found myself in Orlando, we called them quiet times, where you would just spend in the morning time with God. And for a long time, I would read scripture, there would be music, or I would have some kind of stimulus that would accompany my time with God. And we had a teacher who came in and he said, your quiet time should be quiet. If you guys are listening to music and reading scripture and all these things to keep yourself busy, it's not a quiet time. You're prioritizing other things, and God's like on the side of that. And I was like, it's one of those where you like sit back in your seat, just super convicted, like, I'm so sorry, God, I'm so sorry. And so for you extroverts, it's not a bad thing to go out and socialize and be with people, especially Christian people. That's something that Jesus models over and over again, is spending time with his fellow believers, right? He had his 12 and he had his 4. But it's important that we spend time alone with the Father, just like Jesus did. It's important that we even force ourselves to do that. There was a couple times where there were sporting events, a volleyball night that I really wanted to go to, and I felt God ask me to stay. That was unbelievably difficult for me, because it was a social event and it was sports. Those are two things that are central to who I am, if you know me at all. And it was really difficult, but I chose to be obedient in that moment, where sometimes in the past I had failed, and he gave me a lot of revelation, and I felt very filled up that night, being able to have that time alone. So for you extroverts, make sure that you are spending that alone time with God, and that it really is a quiet time, because he wants to speak to you. And then God speaking to people is not just for highly religious people or people in the Old Testament. It's for here and now. So,
And if I can say one word to you parents, it's really important that you understand when your teenagers are struggling with their faith, you need to let them struggle. You need to let them work through it. And it doesn't mean that you're not there with them. It doesn't mean that you're not praying like crazy for them. It doesn't mean that you're not loving and supporting them. But you got to be there for them, and then give them the space to struggle, and be okay with that, because that is that season of life where my faith is becoming my son's faith. And if that never happens, if he never discovers his relationship with Jesus on his own, it will never be real to him. It'll never be meaningful. And so you need to walk with your kids in their journey of faith, but don't pressure them. Don't have expectations of them, right? If they don't want to go to church for a few weeks, you have to be easy with that, because if you put a ton of pressure on them, a ton of expectations, it's actually going to drive a wedge between them and God. And so you have to be firm and encouraging. You got to let them know that you're there. You got to walk up and sit and hug them, even when they don't really want it, and they pull away and they slink away and they get more sullen. You got to pursue them, but you have to do it in such a way that you're not forcing your faith on them, but instead you're helping them to discover their own faith in their Creator.
yeah, so good.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this, hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notifications every Sunday when we release a new episode. And if you liked it, drop us a comment, share it with your friends, and check us out on the website, simplemanproject.com. Come back and see us next week. We're going to have another episode and explore Africa.
Africa.
Excited. Thanks for being on, man. Love you.
Thanks for having me. Love you too.